From Coordinate Sport, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our wrap-up series brings together the best insights from our previous episodes and is a great way for you to jump in and sample the Drive Phase content. We've taken this opportunity on the episode to reflect on those conversations and selected clips from 9 guests across 8 episodes to cover a range of key topics. We also want to take this opportunity to thank all of our listeners for your support and ask that you subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or follow us on Spotify. Since starting the show, we have gone from strength to strength and are so pleased we have been able to execute on our vision of supporting physical activity companies to grow. I'm also excited to say that we have been shortlisted in the Sports Podcast Awards. Please follow the links in the show notes to vote for us in the Best Sport Business Podcast category. Welcome to this week's episode of the Drive Phase podcast and part 5 of our Lessons from Leaders series. Enjoy the show. Generating funds is key for all organisations. Sophie Mason, Ollie Dudfield and Ben Hilton explain their approach to raising funds, engaging with key stakeholders and showcasing impact.
I just think I was really good at bringing the cash in, and I didn't have any idea that I would be, and I had no formal training, but I went into the fundraising team and I did loads of kind of training, day training or 3-day sort of bits and pieces, when you do but most of it was learning on the job. I had some amazing bosses. And I think I just have a natural propensity. I like chatting to people and I really like sort of presenting, and I'm sort of natural salesperson. So I always think when I'm putting together the bones of a presentation, who am I presenting to? How optically will this come across? What messages do they want to? What's going to resonate with them? I had one experience where I went in and I learned a lesson that I have really taken to heart for the rest of my career, which is I really lowballed it. And the guy said, start again, don't mess this up, triple your figure. And then gave substantially more than that. So right. My sort of mantra has always been since then, it's about as difficult to raise £5 as it is to raise 5 million. That's glib of me, but the same sort of energy and effort that's required, particularly with major donors, you may as well ask for a larger amount, as long as you can justify why you need it.
Outward Bound Trust, really established organisation. If you're looking at any, and we'll talk about the others that you've worked with, but I guess for smaller organisations who are looking at raising funds, I guess one of the big things they just want to get in the room, right? So do you have any tips for them to kind of get in front of the right person or trying to look for a tactic to speak to the right people?
Yeah, I think times have changed now. Quite honestly, we had royalty back in the day and that was pretty handy. And getting in the room is always the hardest part. I think it's just, there's some really unlikely introductions that I've had on the back of, following up about 5 different tangents of somebody who knows somebody whose brother-in-law is somebody else, so never disclude them because they seem tenuous or because they seem too personal. And I also think that the way that corporates engage now and need to engage with third sector, and particularly with kind of the sport and sport for good sector, is really different. I think people within companies have a very specific role to be permanently considering and reviewing kind of what's out there that will work with their brand. So it's easier and harder. Back in the day, you went straight to the chief executive. It doesn't really work now, but there are lots of people and organizations trying it. But I think finding the right connection and keeping it very real, corporates hate being presented to in a corporate way. And particularly if you're in the third sector, you sort of have I used to feel this huge pressure that I would go in and I'd have to be kind of like the fun person because they spend their whole life in a meeting about all of their sort of sales.
The balance sheet and
exactly. And they've got this one chance of someone completely irrelevant to their everyday to come in and blow them away, which is also a massive privilege. And I think if you look at it like that, then you probably have more success.
Well, the one other mantra, if you like, that I always work to is start with the outcome. Because a number of times I've sat meeting with a minister, permanent secretary, what have you, and you start talking about sport. And if that's not their portfolio area, you can see straight away, that's not for me. That's not my business. So starting with the outcome. And I think that runs across a whole range. If the element is improve health and wellbeing, if it is about connecting different people in the community, if it is about supporting pathways back into education or those excluded, that's got to be the start point. That's where the engagement and discussion starts, and then working back from there. Because yes, I've had a lot of either metaphorically or literal doors shut because we led with sport could be a contributor here. Not interested. That's just a game. Well, that's something for the elite or for sending teams away to the Olympics. So start at the end point, start with the outcome.
Yeah, so many charities, we're looking at how we can diversify our income streams, but also the benefit that we have of having such a wide network of athletes with amazing experiences that can unlock the potential in young people, but can also unlock potential in workforces as well. So for our charitable aims, we have sort of three models of programs, really. We have our school-based program, which is all around improving behaviour, attendance and attainment. So working with cohorts of young people who are facing challenges and maybe sort of near the brink of exclusion or suspension, and working with those groups of young people to really see themselves in a different light, see themselves in a positive light, and look at building their aspirations for the future and their relationships with their peers, their community, and their teachers as well. We have community-based programs, and that's where we work with our sort of community organisations. And it is a partnership. It's not, a subcontracted agreement. It's our athletes will go in, work with these delivery partners, with cohorts of young people that they're engaged with that need some additional support and motivation. And we'll work with those young people over a period of 6 to 12 months to improve their physical activity, to improve their outlook in life, their aspirations, but fundamentally to improve their health and well-being. Both of those programs always have an element of community impact and social action, so young people can see themselves in a leadership role. And then the third strand that we do for our charitable objectives is developing young people to be leaders within their own communities. So this is really training young people, as we do our athletes, to be able to write programs, write sessions, deal with groups of young people, deal with challenging behaviour and all the flavours that young people bring out in programs that we deliver. We started this programme in Northern Ireland working with an amazing organisation called Peace Players International, and it was really looking at how can the athletes delivering with a Peace Players coach support young people to go into their communities to challenge some of the societal issues their peers are facing, as well as having discussions around that peace and sectarianism focus, which is over in Belfast. We're now bringing that learning into Sheffield, and we're going to be starting 2 amazing programs in the next calendar year and developing young people to deliver health and wellbeing activities to year sixes just as they transition to secondary school. So they have that positive association with health and wellbeing when they move through that secondary environment. And then moving on to the corporate side. So yeah, this is fairly new to us. We've been developing it over the last year, but the role that athletes have, the vision that and the inspiration that people can have just by having a 5-minute conversation with an Olympian or Commonwealth medalist, it's really hard to describe, but it's real. And what we've tried to harness is how can the athlete's experience be used within that corporate setting, not just as an inspirational speaker, but really to develop that teamwork, those communication skills, the resilience when you're dealing with a real challenging project, the timelines are getting close and you're getting, that stress tolerance. So we've got a corporate model now, which we're just bringing in. We've got some great examples already of the impact that it's had within a corporate setting. So that's something that we're definitely growing in the future.
We are all continuously learning and developing. Here are Gary Laybourne and Chris Fatanis and Sophie Mason share their philosophies on development.
Yeah, and exactly, there's never a good time to be a parent, all those kinds of different things, but you make it work around you. You understand what are the strengths that you bring. But critically, again, I got a fantastic chairman, and all those kind of doubts, if I didn't say it explicitly, he picked up on them. And he just said, look, write down the things that scare you the most. Is it that you're going to be in charge of the finance? Is it that you're just terrified that the charity would go under because you've not led before? Write down the biggest things that you're scared about. And then we can put people around you that take care of that. So I think, for anybody embarking on a new challenge, even if that's from a project to launching an entire new business, I think it's just understand what you do really well, embrace that, shout about that, feel passionate about that. And then the things that you don't well, just put in plan a place to either improve on that or bring in people that can support you with that. And I just think if I'd have told myself that even 2 years ago, I probably would have had so much more of a less stressful experience. Granted, it wasn't the nicest time, but it would have been less stressful if I'd have, understood that fully, I think.
I suppose my philosophy, I'm exactly the same person, like in front of a media camera or on a podcast or in a meeting as I am sitting, having dinner with my family. I don't have a sort of professional side, which I'm sure people would laugh at, because I'm sure I can be accused of being unprofessional at times and sort of finding things entertaining that I'm sure I shouldn't. I think with my team, I am lucky enough that I employ a lot of consultants, quite senior consultants. So we have a deeply flat structure. But I've always been quite like that, because I think there's no point having a team unless you listen to them. And I can come up with some mad ideas. And there are times when you need to know that you've got the right people in the room to say, that is the worst plan I've ever heard. Please stand down. We're not doing that. Or to say, listen, we're overworked. We've got to prioritize. So when I was talking before, and I don't think we got to the end of it, about the 4 audiences that we have at Made by Sport. So we really only focus on the business audience, but also kind of government. There's the media, and then there's other charities. But the kind of 5th one that no one really talks about is public. But you're not going to get any of those things unless there's more public awareness about why sport is valuable. The media listens to public, or writes for the public. The government listens to the media. Businesses listen to the media. Businesses listen to their own employees who read the media. So it's kind of circular. And so, with just going back to the team part, we've got multiple agencies that we work with, and we've got this really cool kind of skeleton team of quite experienced professionals, either in the world of kind of impact and insight, or PR and media, or campaign planning, or finance. And, I very much leave it to them to say, here's where I think it's got to go. It needs to look a bit like this. I'm thinking about this other thing. Where do you think it is? And they run it. They get control of it. And I do listen.
Absolutely. The principles, of the culture that we set, the responsibility that we have, working with, looking after children, is huge responsibility, more so now than ever before. But if I go back to, again, just having friends around, we looked after each other. What we did safe. And, I've brought that into the company culture, in that we had a sort of a very simple recipe for success. We went with 3 very simple steps: safety, fun, and learn. Safety was always number 1. Yeah. You couldn't put it in any other order. That's at the top, safety. If it was safe, and if you made it fun, the learning outcomes will soon follow. That was our principle, learning.
Yeah, I mean, it would not be right to say that running this business is the same as running a charity, because there's obviously crossover skills like sales and stuff like that, but they're 2 very, very different things. I think that what I have done is I've grown a thicker skin, right? So, but I don't mean like I'm less easily offended, because that's not what I mean by that. What I mean by that is, when I started, I got stressed about stuff a lot easier. Oh my God, we're running out of money. How are we going to solve this? And, no amount of sleepless nights or whatever would solve that. So what I've done is try and just get a little bit more robust as an individual through this process. And so my advice to anybody that's in startup, it's far too simple to say try and relax, but it is more about try and grow a thicker skin. And if you can't do it yourself, find people that you can talk to help you put these things in perspective.
The sports coaching and physical activity sector is expanding rapidly, with demand for services across the globe. Chris Fatanis outlines expansion opportunities, and Ollie Dudfield discusses global best practice in sport for development.
So I think the sort of the global outlook, it sort of came from some very positive experiences we have of taking young footballers over to Sweden to participate in the world's largest youth football competition, the Gothia Cup. So we've been doing this for a number of years now, and seen great benefit from young people going over to Europe and experiencing, life as a professional footballer, for example, just being part of a squad that has to go to the airport, has to look after its own belongings, has to report to training and match play, and then the rest and recovery. And it gave us a great insight into, gave the young players a great insight into what is required if you have aspirations to play at the top level. Then our focus changed a bit in terms of global travel, because of our global plans took on another sort of level, if you like, when I met and employed a colleague of mine, Lakbir Singh. And Lakbir was the operations manager at the India Business Group, and as such had great experiences working out in India on very exciting projects. And when I brought Lakbir on board at Planet for the group operations, what we quickly discussed and decided to do was to find a way in which we can promote our services to those in India. And to this end, in January 2020, we embarked on a 2-week marketing trip to India, visiting Delhi, Mumbai, and Coimbatore in the south. And that 2 weeks was an incredible experience. We went with a very clear plan, and it really centered around 4 words: how can we help? And that was really our mission, was not to talk about us, but it was to learn about the organizations we were meeting with. And we were talking in front of and meeting the leading organizations in sport in India, government officials, the British High Commission in Delhi. So
this is almost like a trade mission, and I suppose you're going to get really good research, understanding the market. I'm guessing that the education system's totally different, and starting from scratch then, ground zero then in terms of learning.
Absolutely right. It was a trade mission is a very good way of explaining our trip. And those 4 words, how can we help? What we didn't realize at the time was how prophetic those 4 words would become, because less than 2 months after our return to the UK, the world was hit by the COVID outbreak. So, our attention quickly turned to how can we help? How can we support? And to that end, what we did was our team put together a series of fantastic webinars where we would engage with audiences in India and talk about safe practices, COVID safe practices, share our experiences of working in schools under the outbreak of COVID. We talked about safe return to training post-lockdown. So we did a series of seminars and webinars with clients in India, which were very, very well received.
No, probably very rarely sharing work from the UK. I mean, certainly the elements. I think there's been some changes in the policy environment in the UK around the type of organisations, the importance of community-based organisations, as opposed to perhaps the very traditional sport organisations, if you want to use sport for a social outcome. And so some of that was certainly put in the conversation. You've got some countries like Jamaica who've really committed to positioning physical activity within preventative health, and then sport within prevention of young people at risk of gang affiliation or being involved in sort of at-risk activities. And the sort of commitment where, for example, in Jamaica's National Development Plan, sport is a quite important part of a number of aspects of that National Development Plan, which are not related to sport-based outcomes. Of course, they have a very well-known elite sports side, but around community safety, sports there, around health and well-being, physical activity is embedded there. You have sort of long tradition of very innovative work in sport for development in sub-Saharan Africa, and you've got some leaders in this space globally from Zambia, from South Africa into Botswana. And so some of the sort of community up or community driven sort of approaches to sport for development were certainly shared more broadly. And then you've got different contexts. So a number of small island developing states, very small contexts, more countries, and so very different contexts of some of the bigger countries. And what it sort of, I guess, a learning was the context is so important. And so when we put that into, say, domestic context in the UK, actually, there's a diverse range of contexts in the UK. And so actually, at the moment, it's very useful because in the coalition, trying to link those organisations where there's more similarities in the context that they're working, the size of their organisation, the challenges they're facing, rather than just saying, well, the big organisations have all the solutions. And I think that's an important learning I took from those years.
We were lucky enough to have a former chair of Ofsted on the show, and I asked her just how Ofsted perceived PE and school sports.
Really not very well.
And that's always the way. It's just a huge project as well. It's like you've got to have learning somewhere, haven't you? Our listeners are really interested to know, particularly around kind of sport and physical activity. And I don't know if it's maybe it was on your radar at the time, obviously, given that you were working on such, I guess, strategic or governance projects. But how I guess, what's the perspective of sport and physical activity within Ofsted? Does that make sense? Because for us in this sector, we believe of the kind of transformational and transferable aspects of being physically active, but maybe that isn't communicated as well outside of our industry. I don't know if it's on the radar of Ofsted.
Certainly was, and it was certainly on my radar. And actually not just sport, but culture, arts, music,
Definitely,
dance, the range of things that make us a whole human being, and the range of things that actually develop our skills as they develop us as people. And I think that Ofsted inspects what the government classes as important. Yeah. And while I was there, certainly at the time, sport was seen, this was, what was it? I'll probably get the date slightly wrong, but let's go 2005 to 2010, something like that. Sport and physical activity were seen as important. We were coming up to the Olympics. We knew we'd got it. We knew what we were doing. And it was more than that elite sport. It was that sense. So you were then required in schools to deliver a certain amount of PE. And I'm putting PE in inverted commas, but that physical activity. And Ofsted did actually inspect whether you were doing that and inspect how much of that was actually taking place as a part of what was at the time an agenda for the government, which was something, it was just diabolical and you couldn't expect it for toffee, but there was something around community cohesion and the part that schools could play in creating community cohesion. And we really felt the sports arts culture at the time played a massive part in creating that. So there were different ways that we could assess that in Ofsted. And I think that there was a value, school sports were valued. There was investment in it. There was, very strong school sports partnerships. There was a sense that this was something that went beyond just getting kids fit, but actually developed skills, developed competencies, developed opportunities, confidence. And I just don't feel I see that now from this government in the same way. And I think that there are pockets that would like to see that. I think we always can use the hooks, Commonwealth Games as the next hook that's coming up that we can use. But that focus, I really felt that from about 2011 onwards, I think really when we sort of scrapped school sports partnerships and things, it's difficult to see that there has been that same recognition. But I think it's also coincides with, if you look at the primary curriculum that was around in the noughties, the primary curriculum was very much focused on integrated learning. So we would do a lot of project-based teaching in primary that actually took a topic and taught every single subject through the exploration of that topic, and sport and art and music would be very much integrated into that alongside maths, literacy, science, geography, history, but you would do it in a project way, in an experiential way that actually developed skills. With the curriculum review and starting with primary and then moving to secondary and the GCSE review, we kind of completely scrapped what was emerging, which is a curriculum that you need for the 21st century and one that is recognised by the World Economic Forum and every employer you speak to, which is a curriculum that says, let's really develop your skills and let's support that by great content. And therefore, what we need to do is to look at those skills. Now, sport has an absolutely essential role in developing skills, whether that's teamwork, critical thinking, whether that's problem solving or resilience. Sport, many others have an absolute critical role in developing those sorts of skills that we need. Even digital skills, it becomes a lot more interesting to actually look at tracking your performance and how you develop apps to do that. If you're actually performing, then you're just doing it in a theoretical basis. And what we need to do is we are running a busted flush of an education system, and we need to now flush it down the toilet and start again with a curriculum that focuses on skills and use excellent content and those skills development tools alongside that. So you've got the skills, the tools and the content, and you need to have the skills as the driver for that. And the tools, one of which would be sport. And until we do that, we're going to continue to produce a workforce for the 21st century employers that are not fit for purpose, and they don't have the skills that employers want.
Leveraging partnerships can exponentially grow your reach and business. Phil Andrews outlines how USA Weightlifting enjoys a mutually beneficial partnership with CrossFit.
So that makes total sense from an advertising or return on investment perspective, brand perspective, to associate, Mobil One Oil with, say, Lewis Hamilton. But if I go to Mobil One Oil or Pennzoil and go, well, what about weightlifting? It's surprising how they're not so aligned with that. So it is a challenge in smaller NGBs to get really good financial sponsorship. You basically need to have a way to link that community with that brand. Yeah. And there's two ways that happens, three ways. Either it's something in your community, or second, a brand value that's associated. So Gooder Sunglasses, a pretty large sunglasses brand in the US, they're a non-endemic sponsor for us. They like fitness, they like people who are outdoors, they like people who are in gyms, they like people who are active. They associate that with weightlifting. So that's how we got that done. It's not to do with numbers, because you can take out one advertisement in a fairly small city's newspaper and actually reach more eyes than you can through a national governing body. So, the other way that happens is if you have someone who's interested in the sport, who's associated with a brand. So one of our non-endemic sponsors is a bank, and we have people in that bank who are very much interested in weightlifting. And we've obviously had to manage those relationships and massage those relationships, but that's another way that happens. And this, believe it or not, is lessons that goes back to Coventry Blaze. And the third way it happens is people who are associated with the sport. So, one of our largest sponsors is a equipment manufacturer who makes their money creating fitness equipment. So therefore, that makes total sense that they want to be known for that.
And CrossFit is the big question for myself. I know CrossFit, huge opportunity for the sport, huge commercial success as well. What's the relationship like, or what was it like initially? And obviously CrossFit and the techniques and things like that might have got a bad rep over the years and injuries and things like that. How do you manage that relationship between the two? Is it commercial relationship, or is it kind of just partnerships, or how does it tend to work?
We have a friendly relationship with CrossFit. We are looking at actually doing a partnered event next year. We have done that in the past, a long time ago. There's a lot of crossover there. And I think the way to think about CrossFit, the reputation that you just alluded to, which is people getting hurt in CrossFit, is look at any sport. And in any sport, you're going to have really good coaches.
Yeah.
Nominal coaches who really know what they're doing. As a Liverpool fan, I'm going to give you Jurgen Klopp. So Klopp is probably the best coach on the planet when it comes to soccer. And for every Klopp, there is someone on the other end of that who, is destroying ACLs and MCLs, coaching the under 14s, but behind the pub in Burnley. Not the football club Burnley, the city. There are just those two things. The guy at Klopp is probably understood how to prevent injuries for his athletes, yet soccer is one of the worst injury-laden sports, football, in the world. Guy who's coaching behind the pub, who might have a son on the team, a little less knowledge than Klopp. CrossFit is the same way. Right. You have people who are really, really good coaches who truly understand not only a snatch and a clean and jerk, but also all the other movements in CrossFit. And they understand how to coach proper form, how to coach proper technique, when it's appropriate to raise weight and when it's not, when you're pushing an athlete too far. And for every one of them, you have the opposite, who is, he's paid his affiliate fee, might have done his coaching course, but there is a difference between certified as a coach and qualified as a coach. And that is the people who have generated their reputation come from this group down here. There are athletes who obviously play a part in that, who push themselves a little too far, but it is still down to the coach to say, hey, wait a minute. If you look at injury rates at things like the CrossFit Games, they're pinnacle, and CrossFit qualifiers and Granite Games and these types of events, they're much, much less. They exist, absolutely, but they are not massive in injury rate.
Yeah, I'm assuming they're going to be equivalent to any other high performance sporting event, in terms of. Also, I guess in terms of what CrossFit's done for mobility and things like that, those type of techniques that are getting exposed to just the average, potentially prior to CrossFit, might just been the average gym goer who didn't know how to kind of look after their body and maybe prehab and stretch and all that type of things. That's a huge plus.
You're right. I mean, one of the things we really agree with CrossFit on and promote is the first step is getting off the couch. The first step is not getting underneath the barbell. The first step is getting under the couch. So we are not a fan of people going straight into the snatch and the clean and jerk. Is getting into the gym first, getting exercise first. It doesn't have to be. You don't go from 0 to the Olympic Games. So CrossFit has done a lot in terms of putting a barbell into people's hands. It's done a lot in terms of helping people understand that strength's a good thing. It's done a lot in terms of particularly making it acceptable for a female to do strength sports. That's been a massive cultural impact, I think, for us, but also for England and for Australia and others. And it's really done a good job of creating variety because we have two lifts, the snatch and the clean and jerk. So the training regimen for weightlifting can be quite monotonous. So including some elements of CrossFit is really good. There's a history of people doing really well coming out of gymnastics or throwing or other dynamic sports coming into weightlifting. That's not a surprise. And CrossFit ultimately merges weightlifting and gymnastics. There's 7 elements to CrossFit, but those are the biggest 2. And so as a result, it makes sense. People are coming through that. They're getting variety. They're getting things that make sense to help their weightlifting in general. Now, yes, if you're going to be a weightlifter who's going to be very successful, you absolutely need to specialize in weightlifting. If you're going to be a CrossFitter who's going to be very successful, you absolutely need to specialize in CrossFit. But it's entirely possible to do both.
I just think I was really good at bringing the cash in, and I didn't have any idea that I would be, and I had no formal training, but I went into the fundraising team and I did loads of kind of training, day training or 3-day sort of bits and pieces, when you do but most of it was learning on the job. I had some amazing bosses. And I think I just have a natural propensity. I mean, I like chatting to people and I really like sort of presenting, and I'm sort of natural salesperson. So I always think when I'm putting together the bones of a presentation, who am I presenting to? How optically will this come across? What messages do they want to, what's going to resonate with them? I had one experience where I went in and I learned a lesson that I have really taken to heart for the rest of my career, which is I really lowballed it. And the guy said, start again, don't mess this up, triple your figure, and then gave substantially more than that. So right. My sort of mantra has always been since then, it's about as difficult to raise £5 as it is to raise 5 million. I mean, that's glib of me, but the same sort of energy and effort that's required, particularly with major donors, you may as well ask for a larger amount, as long as you can justify why you need it.
Outward Bound Trust, really established organisation. If you're looking at any, and we'll talk about the others that you've worked with, but I guess for smaller organisations who are looking at raising funds, I guess one of the big things they just want to get in the room, right? So do you have any tips for them to kind of get in front of the right person, or trying to look for a tactic to speak to the right people?
Yeah, I think times have changed now. I mean, quite honestly, we had royalty back in the day, and that was pretty handy. And getting in the room is always the hardest part. I think it's just, there's some really unlikely introductions that I've had on the back of, following up about 5 different tangents of somebody who knows somebody whose brother-in-law is somebody else, so never disclude them because they seem tenuous or because they seem too personal. And I also think that the way that corporates engage now and need to engage with third sector, and particularly with kind of the sport and sport for good sector, is really different. I think people within companies have a very specific role to be permanently considering and reviewing kind of what's out there that will work with their brand. So It's easier and harder. I mean, back in the day, you went straight to the chief executive. It doesn't really work now, but there are lots of people and organizations trying it. But I think finding the right connection and keeping it very real, corporates hate being presented to in a corporate way. And particularly if you're in the third sector, you sort of have I used to feel this huge pressure that I would go in and I'd have to be kind of like the fun person, because they spend their whole life in a meeting about, all of their sort of sales.
The balance sheet. And
exactly. Yeah. And they've got this one chance for someone completely irrelevant to their everyday to come in and blow them away, which is also a massive privilege. And I think if you look at it like that, then you probably have more success, or I would hope.
Well, the one other mantra, if you like, that I always work to is start with the outcome. Because a number of times I've sat meeting, with a minister, permanent secretary, what have you, and you start talking about sport, and if that's not their portfolio area, you can see straight away, that's not for me, that's not my business. Right. So starting with the outcome, and I think that runs across a whole range. If the element is improve health and well-being, if it is about connecting different people in the community, if it is about supporting pathways back into education or those excluded, that's got to be the start point. That's where the engagement and discussion starts, and then working back from there. Because yes, I've had a lot of either metaphorically or literal doors shut because we led with sport could be a contributor here. Not interested. That's just a game, or that's something for the elite or for sending teams away to the Olympics. So start at the end point, start with the outcome.
Yeah, so many charities, we're looking at how we can diversify our income streams, but also the benefit that we have of having such a wide network of athletes with amazing experiences that can unlock the potential in young people, but can also unlock the potential in workforces as well. So for our charitable aims, we have sort of 3 models of programs, really. We have our school-based program, which is all around improving behaviour, attendance and attainment. So working with cohorts of young people who are facing challenges and maybe sort of near the brink of exclusion or suspension, and working with those groups of young people to really see themselves in a different light, see themselves in a positive light, and look at building their aspirations for the future and their relationships with their peers, their community and their teachers as well. We have community-based programs, and that's where we work with our sort of community organisations. And it is a partnership. It's not, a subcontracted agreement. It's our athletes will go in, work with these delivery partners, with cohorts of young people that they're engaged with that need some additional support and motivation. And we'll work with those young people over a period of 6 to 12 months to improve their physical activity, to improve their outlook in life, their aspirations, but fundamentally to improve their health and well-being. Both of those programs always have an element of community impact and social action, so young people can see themselves in a leadership role. And then the third strand that we do for our charitable objectives is developing young people to be leaders within their own communities. So this is really training young people, as we do our athletes, to be able to write programs, write sessions, deal with groups of young people, deal with challenging behaviour and all the flavours that young people bring out in programs that we deliver. We started this programme in Northern Ireland working with an amazing organisation called Peace Players International, and it was really looking at how can the athletes delivering with a Peace Players coach support young people to go into their communities to challenge some of the societal issues their peers are facing, as well as having discussions around that peace and sectarianism focus, which is over in Belfast. We're now bringing that learning into Sheffield, and we're going to be starting 2 amazing programs in the next calendar year and developing young people to deliver health and wellbeing activities to year 6s just as they transition to secondary school. So they have that positive association with health and wellbeing when they move through that secondary environment. And then moving on to the corporate side. So this is fairly new to us. We've been developing it over the last year, but the role that athletes have, the vision that and the inspiration that people can have just by having a 5-minute conversation with an Olympian or Commonwealth medalist, it's really hard to describe, but it's real. And what we've tried to harness is how can the athlete's experience be used within that corporate setting, not just as an inspirational speaker, but really to develop that teamwork, those communication skills, the resilience when you're dealing with a real challenging project, the timelines are getting close and you're getting, that stress tolerance. So we've got a corporate model now, which we're just bringing in. We've got some great examples already of the impact that it's had within a corporate setting. So that's something that we're definitely growing in the future.
Suzanne Miller, Gary Laybourne, Ollie Bell and Mike Emery share experiences that have shaped their outlook and career.
You might have, because Hall of Fame of Stevenage Stars is up there as well, which is something I'm super proud of. My parents came over as immigrants in the 70s. My heritage, my father's Malaysian Indian, my mother's Singaporean Chinese. And Stevenage was not very kind of racially diverse. I was one of only a handful of people of colour in my school. So that kind of shaped me. I got into sport because my parents played. Badminton is very, very popular over in Asia. And my dad was kind of a bit of a frustrated athlete himself. He had a really hard background. My dad he was raised in an orphanage. And I think he came over here, as a lot of immigrants do, wanting a better life. Both of them came over to be employed by the NHS as nurses when there was a big recruitment drive. And he coached me for many, many years, all up until I was a professional athlete. So my dad really kind of pushed the badminton, but it always came from me. Me and my sister both played. My sister, she was very, very talented, but I think she just didn't have that kind of that killer instinct. And a lot of the time she suffered a lot with pressure and with nerves, whereas myself, I just had that desire to win at all costs, which kind of set us apart. Me being the younger sibling as well, I think it was easier for me. Our journeys were set up from a very young age with her goal was not to lose to me, whereas mine was to try and beat her. So it kind of sets you up for success.
That's right, yeah. So, I don't claim to have anything in terms of it was a punchy upbringing. We were made bankrupt twice. Sometimes it was a real struggle for my parents. My dad wasn't around much, that kind of stuff. But, the later work that I'm sure we'll get onto that I ended up doing, I don't see myself as disadvantaged or anything compared to some of the challenges that some of the young people have faced that I've worked with and know of. So yeah, but that said, it was an interesting upbringing, but very quickly found sport, knew that that's what I wanted to do from the off, and basically focused all my attention on that, rightly or wrongly, because I spent a lot of time getting in trouble because of it. That's all I wanted to do. So
So when you say you found sport, was that kind of from from family or from school, or just like role models? And generally we always kind of find that theme where there was one or two people who kind of, not sliding doors, but really gave you kind of inspirational, came into your life at the right time, right place.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's an interesting thing, and again, it sounds like I'm slating him now because we've actually got a really good relationship and stuff, but my father was a PT instructor, incredible, obviously fitness freak through the army and stuff, and competed on national level at gymnastics as well. But when he left the army, that struggle to adapt, what he basically had was PTSD, which I think he accepts now and stuff. It just meant that he just wasn't around. He would be out boozing if he wasn't working and stuff like that. So I missed what would have been an incredible person to help me and guide me.
The issue that I take with universities and the issue that I take with the course that I did is the output, it's the employability bit. And outside of the kind of decent academic side of degrees and qualifications, university taught me how to write, it taught me how to research, it taught me how to create an argument, taught me how to stand on
theories, right? Yeah.
Present something. Yeah, exactly. Also taught me how to stay out till 3 a.m. and spend all my money on student loan in a week. But the majority of the program was really good. The problem that I think sports degrees had and probably still have is the output and the employability links and the relationships with operators. Often you can look around and see degree programs that have literally just been created because it's a way to drive students in and, dare I say it, a way to commercialize different programs.
You're always going to have that attraction. I mean, sport, for a lot of the young people, male and female, sports coaching is just attracts people, right? Just by the name of it. But yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of an easy win, I suppose, to put that program on.
Yeah, you're right. And it's just how many people of the 15 that enroll in a sports coaching course end up getting employed and progressing within the sector in which they studied. And it's very few. If I look at my cohort from Brighton, a few have gone on to do PGCEs and will no doubt be the specialist teacher at the schools when it comes to sport. But there are very few that have stayed in the sector. And I think that's representative of that kind of gap between the world of work and education and higher education. And I think that's where some work needs to be done. Employability, soft skills, relationship management, commercial development, all of those kind of things that are so important. The other thing that you need to do when you leave university is the journey just starts again. There aren't many grad schemes in our sector, if any. So you've got to then learn how to communicate your value. And my story was I finished university thinking, brilliant, I'm going to go back to the sports coaching company that had employed me before I went. And I'm going to go and tell them I've got a 2-1 from Brighton University. I've worked with the England golf team. My dissertation was on psychology. I did fundamental movement skills in children. Like, I'm a well-rounded academic now coming out, and I can't wait to put my spin on this business. And basically, I walked through the door for a meeting with the CEO of the business they were basically a sports coaching company operating in lots of schools in the local area, doing PPA cover and after-school programs and things like that. And I had that conversation, and I was basically offered my old contract back at the schools that I'd worked in during the summer at the same hourly rate, and pointed to a guy that I went to college with, and he's going to be your manager. And I was thinking, really? Yeah. That's the output now, and that's the journey that I'm on, is the same, everything that I had before, the same polo shirt and pair of shorts that I was wearing before I'd spent 30 odd grand on a degree and dedicated my time to studying a field. And you look around, and I looked around, and there wasn't much else available, and that's quite hard. And I did put on the pair of shorts and the polo shirt, and I got back to work because there wasn't another option. And I'm also not saying that that's the wrong route for people, but there needs to be some recognition for the academic performance of graduates when they come out, and some alignment to the career pathway that you're then in. I had more to give, and I wanted to give more.
James, I've actually not really reflected on that before, but I guess you're right. I mean, the provision of sport and how established sport is in South Wales is a big driver behind kind of what I'm doing now. So it was easily accessible for me growing up. Football pitches, cricket pitches, sports clubs everywhere. A big reason why I played a lot of sport and why sport was such an important part of my upbringing was also my father, because he was a good football player. I think he established a cricket club as well. And so when I was a young lad, he would drive me all over South Wales to play the sports that I wanted to play. And it very often, he was that dad, would take other kids as well. So on a Saturday morning, our car was full of kids heading up to Barry to play, in the Barry and District League football. And so I guess I owe a lot to him. And I have 3 children myself, and I'm trying to do exactly the same thing, where I don't hesitate to put my hand up, say, yeah, I'll drive everybody, and yeah, I'll help coach the team. And so I have him to thank for my bad knees today.
Suzanne Miller and Zena Hobson discuss planning for life after elite sports and how life skills and experiences directly transfer to employability.
That's a really, really good question. And it's a real juxtaposition, because on one hand, I think I was really well supported. I did have a lady that we would speak to that's a bit of a careers advisor that would look for opportunities for us, Dawnette, and she was brilliant. I remember her name so clearly. And she really we had really good conversations about what I wanted to do post-sport. However, there was a bit of an unspoken agreement between the coaches and the players that if you were concentrating on anything else other than your sport, then you're not giving your sport 100%. And having spoken to so many other athletes, I think that is a common thread. It's almost like, well, we don't want to consider anything else because that means that we're not going to succeed in what we're set out to do with our sport.
Yeah, it's almost planting that seed of like, you're kind of not going to make it. You put that bit of negativity in there. Yeah.
Exactly. I think I was just a little bit shrewd, perhaps a little bit greedy and a bit curious as to what my life would hold post-sport. And I feel that I already knew I had other skills before the sport that I wanted to consider. Part of my story of being an athlete is what I did around that time, of how I kind of looked at other things to explore, and we're not just one thing. And I try and impart that information to the young people as well, that although this may be your focus, if that dream is taken away from you for whatever reason out of your control, what else can you look in your life to be really fulfilled? That was one thing. When I was competing, I also had the opportunity to perform. I was doing a lot of singing, and I always wanted to kind of explore that after the sport. However, I found that was really useful when that was taken away from me, and I picked up an injury that, although I could rehab, the squad cut my funding. I had my funding cut. So that was then something I could turn my attention to, almost distract myself and to create a new identity.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're spot on. And one of the things that was one of the big levers for me wanting to be the CEO of Delalia Rugby Works, thanks to a very generous philanthropist. Delalia Rugby Works got some seed funding to develop an app for young people that actually helps them capture their life experience and map that against the skills that young people need for the workplace and employers want. And they're able to set their own goals and use their own lived experience as evidence of achieving those skills. Because actually getting mum off the floor in a drunken heap and getting her to a GP, or getting a GP to her, and getting your siblings to school shows incredible resilience, brilliant organisational skills, risk-taking abilities, a whole range of skills that actually in conventional education you would never get to showcase. Exactly. But those are the skills that employers want. Yeah. So this app allows you to upload your own evidence and to map that back to the World Economic Skills Matrix that employers have identified that they want globally. And being an app, it also allows you to develop your digital skills, which is one of the biggest skills you need. And we also can facilitate, the core skills, reading, writing, and doing some maths through the app. And that is our way and young people also get to set their own goals and track their own progress. It's in its prototype stage. We call it a minimum viable product at the moment. But I think it is something that is going to become a mainstay of all organisations like Delalia Rugby Works, because that's what we all want to do. And an app like this allows young people to also own their own progress and own their own data. So they're not being done unto, they're actually at the nexus of their own control.
Chris Vatanis gives his take on the state of the sector, while Gary Leybon and Ollie Bell outline the journey towards finding qualifications fit for the industry.
I think people use the word passion a lot. I see that thrown around a lot. We're very passionate about what we do, and that's fine. Passion is obviously a key quality driver for a lot of people. But I think a willingness to learn, to be humble, to actually not think that you know everything about your business or everything about your people. Life changes and quickly. The last 20 months have taught us that. I have a couple of sayings. One is, if you think you're the finished article, you're finished.
Yeah, that one.
Very, very true. And there's another one that I think that we had the very, very great privilege of working with Eddie Jones, the England rugby head coach. Eddie did a masterclass session for us with one of our partner schools, the ACS Cobham, and it was tremendous. What a personality, what an aura that man possesses. But he had a saying which we all picked up and we use to this day is, we win or we learn. And I think that's, again, a great lesson in business, family, not to think of everything as a win or a loss, but life's about learning. So continue that learning journey.
Yeah, I'm impressed with your knowledge. Well done, James. It was indeed the activity leadership. I hope I'm not being disrespectful, but I can only speak from my experiences. We took a dross qualification and played the game, essentially. That was the qualification at the time that for so many providers was just a tick box exercise. And the wraparound piece was, if you were lucky, they maybe got one national governing body type qualification and that was it. So it's fine. Look, it worked for a lot of people. But again, because of the nature of the young people that we were working with, we just didn't want to accept that. And we didn't want to do a tick box exercise. We wanted staff. We wanted good quality coaches that could see, even if they didn't want to have a career in coaching, that there was still other opportunities and things within the sector that they could go on to do. And that's why the beauty of Greenhouse being that you had, at that time, I think there was 14 different sports. So, myself as a head coach for athletics, we had basketball coaches, table tennis coaches, football coaches, all these guys and girls that we brought together and said, look, you might be a table tennis coach. You're going to get this activity leadership framework. We're going to give you your table tennis qualifications, but we're also going to give you basketball and football and all these other quals that mean you're going to be one hell of a multi-sports coach. But we're also going to train you on social media and we're going to train you on business acumen and all these different things. And particularly now as we move through, to your point, the Trailblazer was a brilliant moment for us where we could really feed into that and start to build a qualification that we wanted rather than just using something. We could actually have something that we can feel really proud of, which is ultimately now the community activator coach, and still build around it. I think, for us, that was absolutely game changing. But certainly we were the first in the sector to start bringing tutors into the field, not putting them into college. You don't learn about being a coach in a classroom anyway, really trying to support their learning practically, and then building these different sports. And then what's gone on to now be different employers around the table as a consortium, so that you really reflect the local needs and the needs of that group as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important to set up different pathways. Higher education is not going to be for everyone. Apprenticeships are a decent route for many people and offer a lot of benefits. The specific standard that you're talking about and the process that we went through, I'm less close to. We've got heads of education and talented people at Simspa that lead those projects and the development of standards and run our professional development committees and professional development boards. I mainly look after the partnerships and the marketing and that kind of thing. Yeah. However, going back to that employer piece, you've got to create a system where employers have a voice and those meetings are chaired accordingly and those key points come out. And then whenever a new standard or a new program is created, that gets sign off from a board of people that represent the sector and basically become the voice of the sector to say that this standard is fit for purpose. And it goes back to, you look at a personal trainer qualification, to use your example from earlier on, and if there is no standardization of that, the Groupon cowboys come in and offer PT certificates for 6 hours of work online, and there is no robustness or comprehensive training program or assessment at the end. So we've got to create that standardized piece, and that's what we're kind of starting to see now as people put more effort into shaping what a role looks like, not today, but what the role of a personal trainer will look like in a couple of years, James, which is it needs to encompass more stuff than just teaching a client how to count reps or counting reps for a client or programming for them, because what's expected of a personal trainer, using this example, is so much more beyond that. Now, you're expected to have counseling skills, and you're expected to be able to understand someone's nutrition and these things that everyone are wearing on their wrists, around their necks and on their chests that track our data. Like, we're really informed now, and the public are really informed. So the PT has just had pressure put on them to be able to program, analyze data, work with a load of different wearables. So we've got to make sure that that comes through in the standards, and then speak to higher education to say, you've got to impregnate your degree program with these modules or this training program, so that people walk out of the program work ready, and they're ready to walk into a job, as opposed to the route that I took, which was go and fight for a job.
Building a balance and establishing positive habits is a challenge for us all. Ollie Bell and Phil Andrews share their experiences.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's a balance that everyone has to go through, and I think everyone kind of creates their own way of doing it, and you can feel when you're slightly out of balance, and hopefully you can recognize it in yourself and pull that back in. Jake Humphreys, that we were talking about earlier, one of the main reasons that Jake, out of all of the other amazing people that we could have pulled in for that program, got my attention, was because he outwardly said something that I think I just really subscribe to it, and I think what a role model to say this. And it's completely away from his skill set and his presentation ability, but he said, regardless of where he is in the world, he will fly back from Munich after presenting the Champions League just to be at home with his kids and get into bed with his partner. And I think that's pretty special. And even if it's 4 a.m, because I grilled his team member that set everything up for us on it, and I said, he really does it. And I thought, that's brilliant. And you can't always not stay away if it makes sense to stay away, but I thought that's really good, like balancing the family and keeping the kind of the base at home happy and being present there is so important. And then you let everything else on top of that where you can. But something has to give. Sport will give, or your fitness will give, or work will give, or family will give, but it's just a balance.
Well, recently, I've carved out an hour every day to go to the gym. My physical health got really bad by dedicating a lot to USA weightlifting, and there was good things about that. But I've changed my routine honestly since coronavirus came about to make sure I get up, between 4 and 5 a.m. every day. And I have a certain routine before I go to the gym. But every single day, 6 days of the week, I should say, I go to the gym and exercise, and that's me time. The phone doesn't. Unless there's a burning emergency that I know that's happening, the phone doesn't go with me.
Unless it's the back line or something going off, then otherwise you...
That's exactly it. So, the phone doesn't go to the gym. That hour is for me to work up my physical health. That's probably the number one thing I've done. I made sure to grow a hobby outside of weightlifting. In my case, that's skiing. I happen to live in Colorado, and did some of the best skiing in the world. It hasn't really cooperated a little bit of this year. Our first snow of the year since in Colorado. Well, not in Colorado, but in Denver. Is since I think it's April, is actually due on Thursday, so hopefully we get sun. But that's something I do on Saturdays and Sundays, just to, again, that's something where you're not answering the phone, you're not working on stuff when you're on a ski slope, because if you are, you're pretty dangerous, and you're probably holding your poles only in one hand. Trust me, I've seen it happen, but it's not what you should be doing. So those two are really important to me. And one of the things, like I say, since coronavirus especially, that I've tried to work on is balancing my life and my work. That you work in something really interesting when you work in sport, and that's tough to put down.
Zena Hobson and Sophie Mason give their younger selves advice that we can all learn from.
Probably it's those things you realise as you get older. I would go back and tell myself, you are as smart as you're ever going to be. Really enjoy it. You are super bright and firing on all cylinders. Post-menopausal, I am so dense and so daft now. And I really miss my brighter self. I would tell myself that I'm more energetic. You just value this time, but I think I always did. I mean, I don't have regrets. I'd probably go back and tell myself, really be careful what you put on social media, because it might end up on the front page of the Daily Mail. That happened to me. You know, things like that, I would warn myself of, but that wasn't my much younger self. You know, I was a fully fledged grown up with kids when I shot my own foot off there.
Yeah, I think anyone can make that mistake though with social media, to be fair.
So yeah, those sorts of things. And I think, you know, if I'm to reflect on what has kept me going, I'm a resilient bird. And I have been blessed with the fact that most days of the week I wake up and I think I'm all right, and I wake up reasonably happy. And I don't have to fight my own demons anymore. And if I could give every young person I've ever known a gift, it would be to tell them to get out of their own way and don't fight those demons. They don't exist. They're only in your head. Stop giving yourself a hard time. Like yourself and you will succeed.
I'd say trust your gut. Yeah. So I've had a whole bunch of experiences where, and I would never do this now, I think I've really learned from this, where you're sort of led down a path by your boss or by your team, and you just, in your heart of hearts, you're like, this is a crap idea, or I haven't bought in some way. And unless you really voice those and say, I'm not in it, I don't get it, you will have to kind of pull off some terrible project or event. And sometimes they've worked, but you know, particularly in an Olympic setting, there were about the 2 or 3 things where by the last one, I was like, I'm absolutely not doing that. I have learned from this. I don't think it will work. And I got really pulled apart on it, but it didn't, well, we didn't run it. But I think absolutely trust your gut, because the more senior you get, or not even senior, like the more complicated projects you take on, they take on a whole new complexity of their own, right? You know, once they're kind of live, up and running, you're firefighting several different things on several different fronts. If you fundamentally believe.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports. or on my account at James_Ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.